I'm Soraya.
I'm Amy, and we did the Disney College program.
Together.
Twice.
All right. So Amy today is going to talk about her role in attractions. Which attraction did you work?
So this was on my second Disney College program, and I worked in Hollywood Studios on Rock and Roller Coaster.
And at what time period did you do this program in?
It was fall of 2018, so I was there from the beginning of August to the beginning of January 2018.
What was your application process like, and how did you get this role?
So it was interesting to be doing an application for the second time as an alumni of the program, having already done the college program before. I felt a lot more confident, and I felt like the interviewers knew that I knew what I was doing, you know?
Yeah.
So I didn't really get the question of like, which are you most qualified for? It was more questions of like, they asked me a lot about my first program and how I enjoyed that, and just different things like that. And so I was able to talk about, I knew that I wanted to do attractions. I knew that I wanted to go into that. And so it was cool to be able to talk about my first program because my merchandise role was pretty operations heavy. So operations would be things like attractions. And it was technically a merchandise role, but it was very operations. And so I got to tell them a lot about that, about how I spieled a lot, talked a lot to guests, how my role was fairly safety critical. And so I was able to plant that seed of like, yeah, I've done safety before, I've done spieling before, I'm very comfortable with that. So I feel like that's kind of how I got the role, was I was able to like talk about my public speaking and stuff. Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
What was your training process like?
So training was good. When I got to Orlando and like checked in and everything, they generally, after your traditions class, which is like your first day of training, they'll usually tell you like a general location. Sometimes you get your specific location, but my general location was Hollywood Studios Sunset Boulevard Attractions, which is Fantasmic and Rock and Roller Coaster and Tower of Terror, and then the Beauty and the Beast stage show. And so I knew I was going to be on one of those, but it took a really long time to find out where I was going to be. It took like a week and a half before I found out that I was going to be on Coaster. That's a good tip for you. If you want to sound knowledgeable, nobody really calls it rockin', it's Coaster. Rock and Roller Coaster, but we call it Coaster. Anyway, I didn't find out that I was on Coaster for like a week and a half. So I did a lot of my off-the-job training without knowing where I was going to be. But generally they just do lots of safety training. They do 4 keys training. Disney has 4.
We kind of talked about the safety part though, actually.
Yes, lots of safety, but Disney puts a lot of emphasis on their 4 keys. And they go in order: their safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. So safety always comes before the other 3. Comes number 1, safety begins with me. Very much into safety. But then safety and then courtesy, show, which would be like that character integrity like that we were talking about. And then efficiency, they want you to be doing things fast, but also like recycling and stuff like that would be considered efficiency as well. So those are Disney's big things, are those 4 keys. So we had lots of training for the 4 keys, safety training, things like that, before I found out that I was going to be on Coaster. But I had 6 days of training on Coaster on the job. We were able to open. We did track walking, which is where you go and like walk in the building. And then we trained closing. We trained for all of the different positions, because there's like 12 different positions that you can have as a cast member on Coaster. And so we had to train all of those, get kind of good at those. And then the last day was our assessment. And because it was a safety critical role, our assessment was like 150 questions. It was asking like, it made sure that you knew the height requirement, which is 48 inches, no less, 48 inches. And like the age that you have to be to ride by yourself, things about the single rider line, just lots of really specific questions so that they knew that you knew your job. So that was interesting, but then after that, it's, you know, you're still not comfortable with all of those positions, so it takes some time to get used to it.
What are some pros of your attractions role?
Attraction specifically, I feel like it's really fast-paced. It's fun to be able to, your day usually goes by pretty fast because you're always moving. I talked about this in my merchandise video, but we had rotations on coaster, and there were 45-minute rotations, and so you were only in a position for 45 minutes max, and then you would rotate to a different position. And our rotations were really specific, so you always knew which location you were going to next. So that was really nice to have that reliability. You still had, it was like shaken up a little bit because you never knew like which rotation you would pull, but it was nice once you pulled a rotation, you knew the next place you were gonna go. So that was nice. I feel like attractions, especially on like an e-ticket attraction like Rock and Roller Coaster is, like a big attraction that lots of people like to ride.
Yeah.
It's fun because you're making memories for guests. Like, this is why they're there. They're there for the characters and for everything else, but it's kind of what you think of when you think of
A theme park. Yeah. You think about the roller coasters and the dark rides and all that.
Aerosmith, that's what you think of when you think of Disney World. Aerosmith. Hey Steven, how about some backstage passes?
Wait a minute.
I love that idea. That was another pro of working on Rock and Roller Coaster. We got to make some fun magic.
Yeah.
So there's a pre-show for Rock and Roller Coaster, so while you're waiting in line, you go into a room and it's Aerosmith. You're in their recording studio.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, and there's a cast member there, and they like introduce you to the band, and then the band does their thing, and as they're about to leave, they're like, wait a minute, we can't leave these people like this.
And then the cast member says,
Hey Steven, how about some backstage passes?
and Steven's like, wait a minute, I love that idea. How about some backstage passes? And then their manager is like, fine, we'll send them in a limo, a really fast car.
Make it super stretch. So that's like the theme of the ride, is that you're riding through LA in a limo to get to the concert. So it's really fun and fast-paced, and that was a fun thing to do. It's very themed on coaster.
Do remember one day I was with a big group of my friends who were visiting from Idaho. It was just a massive group, like a group of 10 people, I think. And grouping large groups is stressful, right?
It is, yes. That was the
so
hardest part of my job.
It was kind of funny. I was like, I hope I see my friend Amy, you guys. So we go through the line, and Amy's loading. So she's basically, like in your brain, you're trying to group these numbers into rows.
Yes.
For the ride vehicles. And one of my friends goes, can I sit in the back? And you're like, sure. And then you send him to the back, and then you're like, wait, never mind.
He didn't tell me how many were in his group.
Yeah, it was really, it was funny.
It was
funny.
Okay.
I told my friend, I'm like, you can't do that.
Here's a tip. When a cast member asks you how many people are in your group, please tell them. Here's a story for you. Many stories wrapped up into one story. We're supposed to launch about every 48 seconds. So you are trying to load people into their rows in time to get them on. So you have about 48 seconds to load a limo. A little bit more, but we're supposed to launch every 48 seconds. And so you are going. There's no time to stop. And so a group will come up to you and you'll be like, how many are in your party? And they'll be like, 2. And so I'm like, okay, row 4. And then the next party keeps walking. And you're like, wait, how many are in your party? And they're like, we're with them. You're like, okay, how many are in your party? And they're like, 4. You're like, okay, rows 5 and 6. And then the next party, 11 people. Just tell me 11, please. 11 people. That's so much easier than 2 groups of 5 and a single rider, which I also got a lot. There's 3 groups of 2 and a single rider. So I'd be like, so 7. It was really fun. It's loading, especially, or grouping, that's what we call it, grouping, especially was one of my favorite towards the end, because you just like get so good at it, and you're just sending people down. And
I feel that, because I would have some difficult responsibilities as a costumer, and at first I was like, I hate this so much, it's so hard, and then towards the end of my program I got the hang of it, and the difficult things became some of my favorite things to do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. they become really fun. Grouping and loading. And yep, it's really fun. Attractions is awesome. Here's some cons of attractions, though. One thing is that, like we said, you don't know where you're going to end up before. So they tell you, like, oh, you're going to be attractions, but lots of things fall under attractions. So you could be...
Parking.
You could end up as parking. So you're, like, showing people where to park. You could end up on Rock and Roller, you know, something like Rock and Roller Coaster or Tower of Terror or whatever. You could end up on, like, Figment.
Yes.
Like a slow loading, no line ever ride. You could end up doing PAC, which is parade audience control. So you're basically just telling people to keep walking during the parades and marking things off to make sure that nobody stands in certain areas. So it's kind of a hit or miss thing. You could end up in many, many, many different places.
Yeah. It's the same thing for any role. Like, it's kind of like, I tell people it's kind of like roulette.
Yeah.
Of the whole program, you essentially do your interview and then you kind of tell them your housing preference and that kind of thing. Where you end up living ends up ultimately in the control of Disney. Where you end up working, who you end up working with, all that.
Everything. You just kind of have to trust the company. And honestly, when I got my merchandise role, I wasn't super excited about it. My location, my strollers location, and it ended up being like the best place to work ever.
Yeah,
so just make the most of it. And
definitely. I feel with some of my costuming locations too, one of them in particular, I heard a lot of rumors about it not being a very fun place to work, and that terrified me. But when I got there, I ended up loving it. It was my favorite place. I loved it so much. So
it's what you make it.
It's what you make it, and if you want to do the program, give yourself time to actually experience it and form your own opinions.
Yep, definitely. Go in with an open mind, and honestly, it's 98% about attitude. And
I know people who have gotten parking and they absolutely loved it.
Oh yeah, I've heard really good things about parking. But I had a roommate who worked on an e-ticket attraction that is, people love this attraction.
It's a cool attraction.
It's a really cool, like, we were all jealous when we heard what she got. And she ended up self-terming. She ended up quitting because she didn't like it. But she just had such a bad attitude about it. Even before she found out her location, she just had a bad attitude. And so that was the reason that she quit. She had such an amazing location, but she just had such a terrible attitude about it that it just ruined the program for her. So just go in with an open mind.
Definitely.
I mean, honestly, you work in Disney World.
It's true.
Whatever you do, you work in Disney World. So just make the most of it.
And even if you hate your job, hit up the parks.
Straight up.
That complimentary admission, boy.
Honestly. You know, you're only at work 40 hours a week. The rest of the time. Just go party, make friends.
Have a fun time.
Have fun. Yeah. There's always somebody to go to the parks with. Go to the park by yourself.
I did that all the time. Sometimes it's really nice.
Honestly, some days I much preferred going to the park by myself.
You can do whatever you want at your own pace. It's awesome.
It really is. So do that.
We loved the Disney College program.
Yes, we did.
Thank you for watching.
Have a magical day.